Welcome everyone to join this today's workshop. And I'm Amrita Mukherjee. I am final year master student working in the Postharvest lab with Dr. Eleni Priakoni. Today I'm going to present the topic on principle of post-harvest handling for fruits and vegetables in particular. I know most of these practices may be already practiced by some of you, but we'll discuss more about why, what the science behind it, and why we really need to care about to handle this produce after this way after harvest. So here is the outline of my presentation. I'll go over the what post-harvest means and why we need to reduce post-harvest loss based on the characteristics of the fresh produce and what factors actually influence the post-harvest losses. And finally, we'll go over for handling tips that could be really helpful for harvesting, packaging, and storage and transportation. So let's get started. So what does post-harvest handling mean? So if we just look at the word post-harvest, it's quite self-explanatory. So the activities or the actions we do or take after harvest, that's relevant to that. But it's very interesting, even though post-harvest is mostly or very intimately related to pre-harvest factors that can completely influence the overall post-harvest quality of the crop. And our lab here in Kansas State Olathe campus, we do a lot of work on how pre-harvest factors can influence the post-harvest quality of the fresh produce. And not only the pre-harvest factors, but like the harvest time and the maturity standards, which is also very important to ensure the quality and the shelf life of the crop. Specifically, optimum product quality actually determined during the harvest. We can just maintain that. We cannot improve the product quality once it's harvest or whatever practice has been done before harvest, but we just can maintain the quality. We cannot improve through post-harvest. We just can only maintain. So that we'll need to remember in our mind. So regarding that, I would say we need to think about that fruits and vegetables is still alive after harvest. The answer is yes. So how can we prove these fruits and vegetables are really alive? So the very proof is they really, since I am saying they're alive, so they needs to breathe, and then breathe through the process called respiration, and therefore they releases heat and moisture. And as they releases heat and moisture, they shriveled and sometimes get sick, and finally they can die. So this process actually prove they're alive. So, and we also need to know about the characteristics of these perishable commodities, that which is very apparent that they are live and they have higher content, higher water content, but I will mostly focus on the diverseness of their morphological structure, composition, and general physiology, because as we go through, they come from different part of the plant, not from the same part. So let's look at this slide. Is really explain more. Like onions, we can, if we think about onion, which part, onion is the commodity, it came from which part, or peas, they're coming from different part of the plant. So let's name of the each of the plant parts. Like onions are basically modified leaves, whereas peas are seed and sweet potatoes are roots. Since they are completely diverse and coming from different parts of the plant, there is no single solution or single explanation that can apply to all of them, and single post-harvest handling practice can ensure all of their product quality or shelf life enhancement. So there's a lot of factors that influence the overall post-harvest losses. That includes the internal factors. That's as I have already told about the morphological changes, physiological disorders, and there's significantly influenced by environmental factors, particularly I would say the temperature, and followed by physical damage, pathogen, humidity, and so forth. So now I'm going to start with the very first thing. As I said, the fresh produce are alive. So, and the respiration is the process they're going through the breathing process. So how it's happened? So plant cell actually uses the oxygen to break down the sugar or the carbohydrate, and they releases energy in the form of heat, also releases carbon dioxide and water. And these byproduct, this energy as a byproduct of this process, which releases heat, is the major concern. And we need to control this overheating of this produce after harvest, which is very important step to ensure the product quality and controlling the respiration rate. So here, as I said, they are very diverse in terms of their physiological characteristics and morphology. They also showed a different pattern of their respiration rate. For example, here broccoli is very high in respiration rate, whereas tomatoes is comparatively moderate in respiration rate, and it's around 6 times more in broccoli. So we really need to control the respiration rate if we want to ensure the more shelf life or the quality of the product. And temperature management could be the one potential solution for that. And here we can also find this evidence, like since some of the crops are very highly respiratory capacity, they produce huge amount of heat. And this heat production actually relevant to the temperature, higher temperature. For example, the sweet corn is produces only 6,600 BTU heat at the time of 0 degrees centigrade, whereas this same crop is producing around 60,000 BTU at the time of 21 degrees centigrade temperature. So temperature control is really, really key factor for this. So as I said, temperature is the important factor. So why I am telling this temperature is most important, because it actually speed up the whole chemical reactions, and therefore it's impact the whole shelf life of the product. So for example, it's if it's the temperature is above, it's more than 10 degrees centigrade unit, its respiration can be increased up to 2 to 4 fold. And if we can reduce this temperature up to 10 units, like 10 degrees centigrade, then the overall respiration can be decreased down up to 3 to 4 fold, and the shelf life of the product also can be increased up to 3 to 4 folds. So this slide is more giving more clear picture how it's really impacted and in terms of appearance of the product. The broccoli that's been stored at 75 degrees Fahrenheit, it just become different, loses its green color, and flower buds are more open compared to the one stored in the 40 degrees centigrade, 40 degree Fahrenheit. It's more fresh and flower buds are closed. That looks more fresh. So this is how the temperature impact the product quality. Now, as I said, we need to control the temperature. So there are different cooling methods available, and have their acceptance in the commercial perspective. But among that, the forced air cooling is the higher preference and more effective. But why? So the first reason for forced air cooling choice is it is faster cooling, and faster cooling is really important in terms of controlling the water loss. So that is very important to protect the fresh fruits and vegetables and cool down them rapidly. At the same time, other water-based method like hydrocooling that might not be suitable for some of the products like berries and different kind of products that might have a challenge with the microbial infestations or pathological perspective. But there's some crops that can be applied this method too. So now we can talk about little bit on the forced air cooling, how it works. So basically the forced air cooling is sucking up all of the heat from the product uh, through through this huge fan here, and with associated cooling combustion or something. So they just suck out the all heat and cool the product as soon as possible. But there, as I said, the hydrocooling, they have spray method and immersion method, and different produce have their different uses. Like for radish, they might be spray method would be more effective compared to the lettuce one might be goes for immersion. So this temperature management is not only the key during the harvesting, but it should be maintained throughout the chain until it's delivered to the market, and even in the market or in the consumer perspective. So we need to maintain this temperature, because once we don't able to maintain this temperature control, it's gonna respirate faster and it loses its shelf life and the product quality. So that's why temperature maintaining throughout the chain is very, very important. So there are some other options for cooling, like using cool boards with simple AC. Another key factor is water loss. Water loss is the another major reason. That's how the produce loses its quality and shelf life. It's not only lose its sellable weight, but it also loses the important source of quality loss. So it goes different in color, in terms of appearance quality, textural quality, and nutritional quality as well. So this is very, very important. And this water losses mainly happens because of the different transpiration rate varies among the crop. And this water loss rate, it's can make the product completely unmarketable. And there's two factors specifically impact crops. One can be environmental and another can be anatomical characteristics of the crop. For example, in asparagus, they have a lot more stomata in their stem, whereas which is the morphological characteristics that might affect the higher water loss rate, whereas the spinach is more influenced by the environmental humidity rate that can be controlled. So how can we prevent this water loss? So I would say there's two key measurement we should take to prevent water loss. That would be lower temperature and high humidity. But for this case, we should not be spray our crop with flooding of water or very frequent spray, because that might cause some other sort of problem with microbial infections and pathogen growing. So that's just to be very careful, and there should not be temperature fluctuation accepted, because that can make some condensation on the crop and it can dry it up. That's also can lead water loss. So we have to be very careful on that. We just need low temperature and high humidity, but in a very regulated manner. So beside that, different sort of film, using different sort of film or packaging can also helps to reduce the water loss, but still the surface volume ratio is also important in terms of the how much water loss is gonna happen with the crops. For example, the lettuce has higher surface area, it's more prone to higher rate of water loss compared to the smaller fruits and vegetables. And packaging material is really very, very important, and different kinds of packaging materials can be used for that. Now we are talking about the physiological disorders. So once we are talking about physiological disorders, it's not relevant to either any pathogen or insect, um, or anything like, or not even mechanical damage. It's completely relevant to the environmental factors. For it can be either impacted by the temperature or atmospheric gas concentration difference or the nutritional ability. For temperature, I would say very high heat or extreme heat condition can break down the product crop self membrane, and freezing condition can crystallize the self membrane, and therefore it can break it down or can develop some black color. And chilling injury is the most important key factors. Some of the crops are really sensitive to chilling injury. That means the crop might not reach the freezing point, but it really goes below the temperature then they can tolerate. Therefore they produces different symptoms and disorders that including the um, breakdown of tissues, discoloration, and so forth. However, different atmospheric gas concentration can also produce different physiological disorder. Among them, the black heart disorder in potatoes is quite common, and it's happened sometimes naturally. It's happened because of the inadequate diffusion of oxygen from the central point of the central tissue of the product. And we also see like blossom and rot in tomatoes is mostly happen due to the calcium deficiency. So now a few more slides on the symptoms of chilling injuries. So chilling injuries mostly happen in the tropical crops that it's require relatively higher stress temperature, and below 45 degrees is most of the time they showed up with chilling injury. There's like different discolorations and pitting and scale forming. That's how they showed. But most of the cases, the chilling injury symptoms only appears when they exposed to the higher temperature. Now, chilling injury is also shows lot of symptoms in tomatoes, and tomatoes is one of the most valuable crop that shows also chilling sensitiveness. This chilling tomatoes can be showed up with different irregular ripening and sometimes the softening if this crop is stored below 44 degree Fahrenheit. And the most important part is that chilling injury is also related to the maturity stage of the crop. So here we can talk more about that, and we just can see how maturation and maturity is important uh, in terms of uh, withstand this chilling injury. For example, if we consider the mature grain, if we harvest the mature grain crop, it should be stored in higher temperature because it has much lower capacity to tolerate the chilling injury. Whereas if we harvest the vine ripe crop, it can tolerate the lower temperature up to 44 degrees centigrade, even though the storage duration will be lower, but still they can withstand this lower temperature. So it is sometimes very hard to keep record which crop really needs which temperature, but there's a very interesting and general statement. Usually the temperate region crops can be stored within ranges of 32 to 36 degree Fahrenheit, whereas the subtropical one can be, any subtropical fruits and vegetables can be stored within 40 to 50 degree Fahrenheit. And the root crops and pumpkins can be stored ranges from 55 to 65 degree Fahrenheit. Now the other important factors, that is ethylene, related to the quality of the product. Ethylene is a natural gaseous hormone that is quite evident and synthesized by almost all of the plant. And the stress amount is 0.1 ppm, very, very low. Even though, as I said before, the diversity of in terms of morphology and composition, different crop produce a different rate and concentration of this ethylene. And mostly the climacteric crop, that means that that crop have the ability to ripe even after harvest, and the non-climacteric one which cannot ripe if we do not harvest them at almost at the ripening stage or very mature stage. So this climatic pattern of ripening is really related to this ethylene production. And we just can regulate this ethylene production by lowering the temperature. So temperature is throughout this process is very, very important in terms of maintaining the quality and shelf life of the product. Now here we can see there's, as I said, they're very diverse in nature in terms of producing ethylene. Like passion fruit have very high ethylene producer, whereas citrus is very low ethylene producer. So once we're talking about the climacteric crop and their ripening and aging, because the ethylene is mostly related to ripening and aging of the crop. So one is started to ripen. There is two things happen in climacteric crop. One is to peak. We can see one is increases the respiration rate. It also increases the ethylene production. Whereas the non-climatic is quite stable. They don't change that much during their ripening process, or they're just stable. So if we want to control the ripening of this climatic crop in order to enhance our marketability of the crop, then we should control the temperature, and we can also uh, just harvest the crop at the onset of ripening so that we just can block the ethylene production to enhance this ripening process. Here is some example of climatic crops example and some non-climatic crop example. Apple is the one of the prominent climatic crop, whereas strawberry doesn't show any climatic response. Now, as I said, some of the crop produce ethylene and some of them don't produce ethylene, but they are sensitive to ethylene. For example, cabbage is here we can see, and as I said, they don't produce ethylene and some of them show more sensitivity towards ethylene. And this sensitivity can be expressed as yellowing of the leaves or internal browning and lignification and so forth. But how can we manage these undesirable changes that might affect this marketability? First of all, then again, like we need to maintain the cooling chain throughout the process. That can help for this reducing ethylene management, reducing ethylene, and also mixing the ethylene sensitive and ethylene producing crop should be avoided. We should separately handle these two crops and need to know which is ethylene producer and which is not. And sometimes some machineries like greenhouse heater can also expose some ethylene to the crop. Uh, Apart from that, some other undesirable changes like different morphological changes, including the sprouting and rooting, and elongation and curvature or seed germination can be the other example. Here you can see some germination of these onions. It can be controlled through the totally temperature management and ethylene management. Here's the other example of asparagus. They are more tend to grow away from the gravity. So we always need to keep the asparagus and cut flowers upright so we just can avoid this unwanted bending of this crop. And now definitely the physical damage is the greatest cause to loss of most of the fresh horticulture produced. It can be happen due to water loss, as I said, respiration, pathogen growth, and so forth. And not only that, these post-harvest loss can also be happen due to the handling method, like melon harvesting and throwing them to the tractor during harvest. It can just develop a bruising and completely post-harvest damage afterward. And pathological decay definitely is another important cause, but they're very interesting. The pre-harvest factor can already impact this crop, and that can express in the post-harvest level or post-harvest stage. And most of the cases, this appeared as the breakdown of epidermis of this commodity, and that can show up here like browning or fungal infections and so on. Now we are just going to have, we're just getting have few of the tips that we need to uh, keep in mind. First of all, we have to harvest at the very early morning, but we need to careful about it. Should not be very misty or very moist condition. Just after sun dried out the moisture, we need to start the harvesting, and proper maturity stage is very important, as it will impact throughout the storage and the post harvest condition. And general sanitation is very important. That can be relevant to the pathological infection and so forth. And clean totes and buckets and packaging materials is also important. But it's apart from all that, we need to understand, we need to train our workers and handlers and whoever work in this harvesting or harvest related work, because they're gonna this all of this process actually ensure the total shelf life of the crop and improve the quality, and it's also promote the produce safety. So it's very important. The same few more suggestions or points we need to consider. We shouldn't overfill the totes or buckets, because just one single bad apple can spoil the whole bunch. We need to keep remind and need to keep in our mind this phrase, because if there is a one spoilage crop, it's gonna impact all others. And therefore we definitely need to discard the damaged one. We need just pick the clean one. And again, we need to train the workers. We shouldn't forget about that anyway. So there are different handling materials can be used, clean plastic crates. And regarding the transportation from the field, if possible, we'll try to keep we'll try to keep maintaining cool chain from the harvesting to the storage house. And just after harvesting, we shouldn't tightly wrap or pack the produce, because it can induce overheating. So we just need to make sure we will package our harvested produce quite loosely so that they can breathe and there's no overheating incidents happen. And if possible, we'll use our cool chain, cool track. If not possible, then we'll definitely keep all of our produce in a shaded condition, and we'll choose best of our graded roads, not the graveled one that can induce bruising of this crop. In terms of cleaning, we just need to maintain sanitary actions throughout this process, from the produce, from the cleaning tools and washing everything. But at the same time, we need to keep in mind the washing and cleaning might not be applicable for all of the crops. All of the crops really don't need or cannot withstand this cleaning and washing, especially and the tomatoes, berries, and green beans, cabbage, and peas, we don't need to wash. Otherwise, if we do wash, this might be adversely affect all these crops in terms of microbial infection related to the water. But the crop like radish, that might need to wash, and there's different methods and equipments can be used here. You can see the spraying water over it, and there is some specialized design buckets here. So we can see a couple of more picture of that. So now we are talking about more packaging and storage. So during packaging, we always need to keep mind and choose the appropriate packaging material that might impact the overall quality of the product. And as I said before, we should be keep in mind to avoid any damaged produce, because one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch. So we need to separate the damaged one from the good one, and also need to separate them based on their maturity stage, because the more mature one, as I said, can tolerate more chilling or lower temperature, whereas the immature one might not. So we shouldn't mix anyway. And if we have the opportunity to use different cool rooms, Then we'll just set one for like pre-cooling temperature up to 5 to 50 to 57 degree Fahrenheit, and the other one would be for more cool temperature like 32 to 36. If we don't have this facility, then we'll just set our temperature in the middle range like 41 degree Fahrenheit. And in terms of if we're dealing with chilling sensitive crop, we might only use the room AC in that case. So at the very last, I would say the key to the success of this post-harvest handling of fruits and vegetables, we need to keep in mind the highest possible initial quality should be maintained. As I said, it cannot be improved once the product is harvested. We can maintain the quality, we cannot improve. So it's very, very important, and proper maturity stage is very important. And definitely the careful handling and avoid any physical damage would be very important to maintain the shelf life and quality of the product. And I will go through the whole presentation, I think, and I said repeatedly, the management of temperature is the can make a huge difference in maintaining the quality of this produce, followed by relative humidity, atmospheric composition, and ventilation. And sanitation cannot be avoided or undermined because it's it's related to three key. One is increasing shelf life, quality, and produce safety. So we need to mm, make better understanding of that. With that, I am finishing up my presentation today. Thank you for bearing with me.